The rain lashed against the battered roof of Daniel's seaside cabin, the Atlantic's fury rattling the windows with every howling gust. Inside, the retired Coast Guard captain sat in a worn armchair, a half-finished puzzle spread before him. The storm had pinned him inside for 2 days now. Only the rhythmic ticking of an old clock and the intermittent crackle of the fireplace broke the heavy silence. Then a noise, a frantic, weak scratching at the back door. Daniel stiffened, setting his coffee aside. He listened. There it was again, a desperate scrabble, then a faint whimper almost lost in the roaring wind. He rose slowly, muscles aching from years of service and solitude. Approaching the door cautiously, he peered through the fogged window. His breath caught. Outside, huddled against the storm, was a soaked golden retriever. Her golden coat was plastered to her ribs by the rain, and at her side 2 tiny puppies, shivering violently. She lifted her eyes to meet Daniel's, and in them he saw exhaustion, fear, and a stubborn, flickering hope. Daniel hesitated. Letting her in meant opening his quiet, ordered world to chaos. But leaving her out there? Impossible. He opened the door. The dog staggered inside, her paws slipping on the wooden floor, the pup stumbling after her. Daniel grabbed a towel from the nearby rack and knelt down, rubbing her gently. She flinched at first, a low warning growl rumbling from deep in her throat. But when she realized he meant no harm, she allowed the contact. "Easy, girl," Daniel murmured. "You're safe now." He gathered the shivering puppies, wrapping them in another towel, and laid them near the fire. The mother immediately curled around them, her body trembling, but her eyes never leaving Daniel. That night, the storm battered the world outside, but inside the cabin, a fragile peace settled. Daniel watched the mother dog and her pups doze beside the fire, feeling a strange, almost forgotten warmth stir in his chest. He hadn't planned for any of this. After losing his wife 3 years ago, Daniel had retreated into his solitude, convinced that he was done with saving anything or anyone. But as he watched the little family breathe in sync with the crackling fire, he realized he wasn't as finished as he'd thought. The next morning dawned gray and sullen, but the worst of the storm had passed. Daniel ventured into town, the retriever curled in the back seat of his old truck, her puppies nestled against her belly. The vet clinic was small, but welcoming. Dr. Emily Rowe, a woman with kind eyes and a firm voice, examined the trio carefully. "Malnourished," she said, tracing a hand along the mother's thin frame, "but resilient, and the pups have a good chance thanks to her." Daniel nodded, relief flooding through him. "You'll need patience," Dr. Rowe warned. "She's been through a lot. Trust doesn't come easy." "Neither does giving up," Daniel said softly, watching the dog lick her puppies with tender care. In the days that followed, the cabin transformed. Daniel named the mother dog Marina, and the pups Finn and Pearl. Slowly, Marina began to trust him. She'd flinch at sudden movements and refuse to eat if Daniel was too close. But little by little, the walls she had built around herself began to crack. One evening, as the sun set in fiery colors across the angry sea, Daniel sat on the porch steps, fiddling with a piece of driftwood. Marina padded over, her steps hesitant. She sat beside him, her fur brushing his leg lightly. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. He simply let her be. When Marina rested her head against his knee, he felt tears sting his eyes for the first time in years. In the weeks following the grand opening and Lucky's rescue, Safe Haven blossomed even more vibrantly. What had started as a dream now pulsed with life, laughter, and a rhythm all its own. Every Saturday, Daniel, Emily, and Tommy organized community days. Families would visit, bringing their children to learn about animal care, rescue efforts, and the importance of compassion. Workshops were held under the big oak tree near the visitor center, where volunteers taught first aid for pets, proper nutrition, and even basic dog training. Daniel loved seeing the awe in the children's eyes as they fed the animals or brushed their coats. Marina, Misty, Finn, Pearl, Oliver, Stormy, and Lucky became gentle ambassadors, teaching lessons about patience, trust, and recovery. One Saturday afternoon, a young boy named Sam visited with his parents. Sam was shy, barely speaking a word, his small hands clenched into nervous fists. But as soon as he met Misty, The quiet kitten who had once drifted onto the beach, something shifted. Misty climbed into Sam's lap without hesitation, purring softly. Sam smiled. It was the first time his parents had seen him smile in months. They decided to visit every weekend, and eventually they applied to adopt Misty, giving her a new forever home. It was a bittersweet moment for Daniel and Emily, but it filled them with pride and hope. Misty had found her purpose, just like they all had. Inspired by Misty's story, Daniel and Emily created the Haven Hearts program, matching carefully chosen animals with families in need of healing, those facing grief, loneliness, or hardship. Each match was celebrated with a small ceremony under the oak tree, ribbons tied around the new companions' necks as a symbol of new beginnings. Safe Haven's reach stretched even further. Schools organized field trips. Retired veterans came to volunteer. Marine biologists collaborated with Daniel to monitor the coastal ecosystem. Artists painted murals of Marina, Lucky, Stormy, and the others, transforming the shelter into a vibrant, living work of art. And every evening, as the sun slipped below the horizon and the stars shimmered into view, Daniel would sit on the porch, Marina at his side, and reflect on how far they had come. Beyond the storms, beyond the loneliness, beyond the fear, they had built a sanctuary, a true home not just for the animals, but for everyone who needed one. And still, Daniel felt, their best days were yet to come. As summer turned into fall, Safe Haven adapted to the rhythm of the changing seasons. The air grew crisper, and the golden leaves painted the landscape with rich, warm colors. Autumn brought the Harvest Festival, another idea born from Emily's boundless creativity. The festival would celebrate the changing season and raise funds to expand the Haven Hearts program. Preparations began weeks in advance. Volunteers decorated the property with hay bales, carved pumpkins, and colorful banners. Local farmers donated fresh produce, and the townspeople organized bake sales, craft markets, and hay rides along the coast. Daniel, though never one for big crowds, found himself smiling more often than not as he watched families carve pumpkins, children bob for apples, and animals bask in the attention. One evening just before the festival, Daniel and Emily took a walk along the shoreline, Lucky and Stormy chasing the surf ahead of them. "I never imagined all this," Daniel admitted, his voice soft. "Not after everything." Emily slipped her hand into his. "Neither did I, but sometimes the things we don't plan turn out to be the best parts of our story." He squeezed her hand gently, feeling a warmth that went beyond the touch. The Harvest Festival was a resounding success. Crowds poured in from neighboring towns, drawn by stories of Safe Haven's mission. News crews covered the event, sharing images of the joyful gathering across the region. The festival ended with a lantern release at twilight. Hundreds of glowing lights lifted into the sky, carrying wishes, hopes, and silent prayers into the autumn night. Daniel stood among his friends, his family, and his animals, watching the lanterns rise. Marina leaned against his leg, her eyes reflecting the flickering lights above. Beyond the waves, beyond the winds of change, Safe Haven continued to grow, not just as a place, but as a promise. A promise that no matter how dark the night, there would always be a light to guide the way home. As autumn deepened into winter, the coast was wrapped in a blanket of mist and frost. The air grew sharper, the days shorter. Despite the cold, Safe Haven pulsed with life and warmth. Emily proposed a Winter Wishes event to ensure the shelter could continue providing for its growing family during the harsh months. Volunteers decorated the cabins and enclosures with twinkling fairy lights and evergreen wreaths. Blankets, heaters, and special food supplies were gathered, thanks to donations flooding in from nearby communities. One bitterly cold morning, a call came through. A massive abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town was rumored to be sheltering dozens of stray animals, trapped after a blizzard blocked the entrances. Daniel, Tommy, Emily, and a team of volunteers immediately mobilized. They packed warm blankets, portable heaters, food and medical supplies into trucks and set off through the swirling snow. When they arrived, the sight took Daniel's breath away. Emaciated dogs, shivering cats, and even a pair of frightened rabbits huddled together for warmth. The rescue team split into groups, carefully coaxing the animals out, wrapping them in blankets and carrying them into the heated trucks. It took hours. Some of the animals were too weak to walk, others too terrified to move. But Safe Haven's team worked tirelessly, refusing to leave a single soul behind. By nightfall, the last truckload arrived back at Safe Haven. Every available shelter space was filled. The volunteers worked in shifts, feeding, washing, and comforting the new arrivals. Among the rescues was an old black Labrador with cloudy eyes. Despite his frailty, he wagged his tail weakly when Daniel knelt beside him. "Welcome home, old fella," Daniel whispered, feeling tears prick his eyes. They named him Shadow, honoring the way he had survived in the darkest corners of the abandoned warehouse. The story of the winter rescue spread quickly. Donations surged. Volunteers arrived in greater numbers. Safe Haven became more than a shelter. It became a symbol of unwavering hope. On Christmas Eve, the community gathered for a Lights of Hope ceremony. Hundreds of lanterns were placed along the shoreline, glowing softly against the dark waters. Daniel stood at the heart of it all, surrounded by Emily, Tommy, the volunteers, and the animals they had saved. Marina pressed against his side, and in that moment, Daniel knew. Safe Haven had not just saved lives. It had saved him, and it would continue to save many more, for as long as hope was needed. Beyond the waves, beyond the storms, Safe Haven would always stand, a beacon of light in the darkest night. As the harsh winter gradually loosened its grip, the first whispers of spring began to weave through the coastal town. Soft rains washed away the last remnants of snow, and the scent of salt and fresh earth filled the air. At Safe Haven, the rescued animals who had survived the brutal winter began to thrive. Shadow, the old Labrador, grew stronger each day, often seen basking in the morning sun or gently herding the younger pups around the yard with surprising grace. Daniel and Emily organized a spring renewal event to celebrate the shelter's resilience and the beginning of a new season. Gardens were planted along the pathways, lavender, daisies, and wild roses bursting into life. A memorial garden was also created, honoring the animals that Safe Haven had lost, reminding everyone that each life, no matter how fleeting, mattered deeply. As part of the event, they introduced Rescue Stories evenings, where volunteers, adopters, and visitors could gather around the bonfire and share tales of how animals had changed their lives. Tears and laughter blended into the night sky, forming a tapestry of connection that was stronger than any storm. One evening, as Daniel listened to a little girl recount how adopting a timid dog from Safe Haven had given her the courage to overcome her fear of speaking at school, he realized just how far their journey had come. Safe Haven was no longer just a place for rescue. It was a place of transformation for both animals and people alike. Emily, seeing Daniel lost in thought, nudged him gently. "You built this," she whispered. "No," Daniel said, smiling as he looked around at the circle of glowing faces. "We all did. Together." As twilight deepened and the first stars began to flicker to life above the ocean, the fires of Safe Haven burned bright, not just in the hearths, but in every heart it had touched. And as Daniel stood there, surrounded by his family, his friends, and the legacy they had created, he knew that beyond every wave, beyond every storm, there would always be a new dawn waiting, ready to be embraced, ready to be lived. As spring deepened, Safe Haven grew more vibrant with each passing day. The once barren grounds now overflowed with life. Flowers blossomed, trees unfurled their new leaves, and the shelter buzzed with energy. Daniel and Emily expanded the Haven Hearts program by introducing Hope Walks, where volunteers took adoptable animals on weekly outings through town. These walks not only helped socialize the rescues, but also spread awareness, drawing even more visitors and potential adopters. One Saturday during a Hope Walk, a senior woman named Mrs. Cartwright, who had recently lost her husband, met a three-legged hound named Jasper. Their connection was immediate, as if two weary souls had found their missing piece. Daniel watched from a distance, his chest tightening with emotion as Mrs. Cartwright leaned down and Jasper licked her cheek, tail wagging furiously. Within days, Jasper had a new home, and Mrs. Cartwright had a renewed reason to smile. Meanwhile, Safe Haven began hosting healing retreats, Weekends where veterans, trauma survivors, and those needing emotional restoration could stay, work with the animals, and reconnect with themselves. The first retreat was small, but its impact was profound. A young veteran named Lucas, burdened with silent scars from his service, found solace in caring for Stormy and Oliver. Daniel watched as Lucas, once withdrawn and guarded, began to laugh again, his walls slowly crumbling under the weight of unconditional love. By the time the second retreat ended, several participants had expressed interest in becoming permanent volunteers, eager to give back to the place that had given them so much. Safe Haven had become a sanctuary not just for animals, but for people too. A place where broken hearts found the courage to heal and to hope again. As the days lengthened and the ocean shimmered under the endless sky, Daniel stood by the garden one evening, Marina at his side, watching the lights of Safe Haven twinkle like stars fall into earth. "We've created something timeless," Emily said, joining him. Daniel nodded, his heart full. "Something that will outlive us all." Beyond the waves, beyond the seasons, beyond the trials of life, Safe Haven had rooted itself deep in the hearts of all who came seeking shelter, and its blossoms of hope would continue to bloom for generations to come. As spring edged into early summer, Safe Haven's activities expanded even more. New partnerships blossomed. A therapy dog program launched in collaboration with local hospitals, bringing Safe Haven's rescues into the lives of patients who needed comfort and healing. The sight of Daniel walking Marina into a children's cancer ward, the children's faces lighting up, would be an image he would carry in his heart forever. Veterinary schools began sending their students to intern at Safe Haven, learning not just medicine, but the importance of compassion. Artists continued painting the walls, vibrant murals of seashells, forests, animals, and stars, turning the shelter into a living, breathing work of art. And perhaps most beautiful of all, several animals who had been deemed unadoptable, too old, too scarred, too afraid, finally found their forever homes. There was Willow, a deaf cat who was adopted by a family fluent in sign language. There was Rusty, a blind senior beagle who became the adored companion of a retired musician. There was Hope, a tiny dog who had survived the worst of abuse, now the soul of a young woman rebuilding her life after loss. Each match felt like a quiet miracle. Each goodbye was bittersweet, but Daniel understood now. Safe Haven wasn't just about holding on, it was about setting free lives that deserved love, setting free hearts that had learned how to beat again. One evening, as the sky blushed pink and the waves whispered secrets to the shore, Daniel, Emily, and Tommy stood together, looking out over the grounds they had built, not with bricks and mortar alone, but with hope, trust, and unyielding kindness. Tommy clapped Daniel on the back. "You realize, mate," he said, grinning, "this is just the beginning." Daniel smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And as the stars blinked awake above the ocean, Safe Haven shone brighter than ever. A lighthouse for every soul who had ever been lost, reminding them that home, healing, and hope were never as far away as they feared. As the first true days of summer unfurled, Safe Haven became not just a place people visited, it became a destination people journeyed toward with hope in their hearts. Daniel, Emily, and Tommy found themselves busier than ever. Requests flooded in, not only for adoptions, but also for collaborations, workshops, and rescue missions in neighboring towns. One morning, while Emily was sorting supplies in the visitor center, a call came in from a small village inland. A family farm had flooded after unexpected heavy rains, and several animals, horses, goats, even a few abandoned dogs, were stranded. Without hesitation, Daniel rallied the volunteers. Trucks were loaded, boats borrowed. Marina barked excitedly, sensing the energy around her. The rescue mission was exhausting, muddy, and dangerous. Wading through waist-high water, Daniel and Tommy worked side by side to lead terrified animals to safety. Emily and the others set up temporary shelters, drying and feeding every creature they could save. By dusk, tired but triumphant, they had rescued over 30 animals. Back at Safe Haven, they turned the open fields into makeshift pastures, laughing and shouting to one another under the starry sky. Children from town brought blankets. Retired farmers brought bales of hay. The whole community moved as one, a symphony of care. It was during those days that Safe Haven's next idea was born, the sanctuary pastures, a permanent extension for rescued farm animals needing a second chance. Emily beamed when Daniel approved the project without hesitation. "Let's give them a home," he said simply, watching a young goat nuzzle against Lucky. Tommy grinned. "A whole new chapter, mate." They worked tirelessly that summer. Fences were built, small barns raised. The murals expanded, now depicting not just cats and dogs, but goats, horses, cows under golden sunsets. Safe Haven wasn't just growing, it was becoming a living, breathing dream, a place where the forgotten, the broken, and the abandoned weren't just saved, they were celebrated. Daniel often found himself standing quietly near the fences in the evenings, Marina at his side, watching the herds graze peacefully against the backdrop of the endless ocean. "You know," he said one evening, as Emily joined him, "sometimes I think the world isn't as broken as it seems." Emily smiled softly, slipping her hand into his. "Sometimes it just needs someone to believe it's still worth saving." Daniel squeezed her hand, feeling Marina lean into his leg, and as the sea sang its ancient lullaby beyond the fields, Daniel closed his eyes and listened. Not just to the waves, but to the heartbeat of Safe Haven. Steady, strong, unstoppable. As summer faded into a gentle autumn once more, Safe Haven stood tall and vibrant, a beacon of everything it had fought to become. The sanctuary pastures flourished with life. The Haven Hearts program matched more souls than ever before. The healing retreats expanded, welcoming visitors from all across the coast who needed a place to mend. The once quiet seaside property had become a living, breathing mosaic of stories, each one woven together by trust, by second chances, and by love. Daniel stood one evening near the old boathouse, now transformed into a cozy educational center, watching as a group of children listened wide-eyed to Tommy's stories of daring rescues. Marina, her muzzle now dusted with gray, rested faithfully at his side. Finn and Pearl, Stormy and Lucky, and a dozen new rescues frolicked nearby, their joyful barks dancing across the golden fields. Emily approached, a clipboard tucked under her arm and a smile lighting her face. "Everything's ready," she said softly. Daniel nodded, his chest swelling with something that had once felt foreign, but now lived within him easily. Peace. Together they walked toward the central garden, where a simple plaque had been placed that afternoon. It read, "Safe Haven Coastal Rescue. Founded in compassion, built with hope, growing in love." Beneath it, in smaller letters, "No soul too broken. No journey too far." A gentle breeze stirred the wildflowers around them. The sunset painted the sky in hues of fire and rose. Daniel placed his hand on the plaque, feeling the coolness of the stone, the solidity of it, the permanence. Safe Haven would endure, not because of buildings, not because of programs, but because of the countless hearts that had come here seeking shelter and had found so much more. They had found home, and beyond the waves, beyond every storm, Daniel knew there would always be a place where hope lived. 5 years later, the sea sparkled under a cloudless sky, the wind carrying the scent of salt and wildflowers through the bustling grounds of Safe Haven. Children laughed as they ran alongside goats and ponies. Volunteers carried baskets of fresh herbs and vegetables from the communal gardens. The murals now covered almost every available wall, a glorious testament to resilience and beauty. Daniel, his hair a little grayer, his face marked with sun and smiles, leaned against the fence, watching a group of new volunteers lead a hope walk toward town. Marina, older now but still regal, lay nearby, her head resting on Daniel's boot. Emily approached, her cheeks flushed from organizing another healing retreat. "They just called," she said, breathless with excitement. "Safe Haven was voted one of the top animal and human wellness centers on the entire coast." Daniel laughed, a deep, easy sound. "Imagine that." They watched as a young girl knelt to hug a rescued dog, and an elderly man placed a wrinkled hand on the back of a calm, wise horse. Life pulsed here. Hope bloomed, and Safe Haven continued its quiet, extraordinary mission. to remind the world that no soul was ever truly lost, only waiting to be found. If you liked our new story, please like, share, and tap the bell to hear new stories told always.